We all know that Musk can make the impossible possible. With this, I would like to share with you what Elon Musk explains what it would look like if a rocket were transparent. So make sure to stay tuned until the end so you won't miss a thing. Welcome to the Elon Musk Era. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our upcoming videos about Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and more. In this video, I will tell you about the steps I take to build a transparent hybrid rocket engine, and you will also find out what Musk has to say about rockets. So stick around until the end of this video. Additionally, I will explain what it would look like if rockets were transparent. It might seem wise to start with a more traditional design, a solid fuel rocket engine, before discussing a hybrid rocket engine, and the boosters that launch the space shuttle into orbit. They need to be able to produce an incredible amount of thrust, so solid fuel rocket engines are used. Then, once the rocket engine has been ignited, controlling the thrust is not particularly important. Furthermore, they are also among the most economical form of rocket engines, which is why they are used in fireworks. In solid rocket engines, there are two primary propellant components, oxidizers and fuels. For solid rocket engines, the oxidizer typically takes the form of powdered chemical that releases oxygen upon heating. These finely powdered oxidizers are now mixed with the powdered fuel as well. Also, aluminum powder is typically used as a fuel in high-performance engines, and charcoal is typically used to fuel lower-performance engines, such as fireworks. A rocket's exhaust requires these two components, fuel and oxygen, just like any other combustion reaction. On their own, neither component produces a very impressive reaction. It is only the fuel that can burn it all, and that's thanks to the oxygen that is provided by the air surrounding it. Thanks to the oxygen in the air, this chunk of charcoal is barely able to glow by itself. Although, of course, a rocket might not be powerful enough to launch into space with it. In the same way, this powdered oxidizer doesn't react in any way whatsoever, even when heated by a torch. It turns into a melted mass. Once these fuels and oxidizers are combined, we can see any reaction that could potentially lift a rocket. During this demonstration, the charcoal is all solid, so where it is touching the pile directly below it, it reacts only with the oxidizer. Assuming, however, that the charcoal lump has also been ground thoroughly into a fine powder and mixed with the oxidizer, that would be basic rocket fuel. Whenever this type of rocket fuel is ignited, it becomes extremely difficult to extinguish since it contains oxygen and fuel in equal quantities. It is not possible to smother the fuel because oxidizer is mixed right into it. Once a solid rocket engine is ignited, the only way to extinguish it is to lower the temperature of the fuel below its ignition temperature. Practically speaking, it's impossible since once a solid rocket engine is ignited, it stays on for as long as the fuel burns up. However, if you wish to have a rocket engine that can be turned on and off, and more than that, the ability to control the amount of thrust it produces, in this case, a hybrid rocket engine will make more sense. In contrast to a solid rocket engine, in which the fuel and the oxidizer are mixed before the engine is even fired up. When a hybrid rocket engine is in operation, the fuel and oxidizer remain separate until both are ignited and thrust is generated. As you can see, this simple setup illustrates how a hybrid rocket engine works. Imagine that you have a tank of oxygen and a regulator that outputs oxygen to a piece of wood. It is obvious that the oxygen tank in this scenario is acting as the oxidizer, and the wood is fuel. In this case, you would put an ember in front of the oxygen source to ignite it, and when you turn on the regulator when the oxygen starts flowing, the ember will burn at an amazing rate, quickly igniting the wood. Then, look at how intensely this wood burns due to the oxygen. Take note as well of the fact that the flame does not return to the oxygen tank. The flame only occurs where the oxygen tank meets the wood, no matter how far you pull it from the fire. In this case, it once again proves that oxygen itself is not flammable until it reacts with the fuel. Hence, this is one of the basic working principles of a hybrid rocket. A solid fuel supply is coupled with a liquid or gaseous oxidizer, which is maintained by a separate tank connected by a regulator, and we can then turn the engine on and off by turning this regulator on and off. Furthermore, since the regulator has such fine control, we can limit the supply of oxidizer to the fuel without completely shutting down the engine. This allows the thrust of the engine to be controlled very precisely under any circumstance the engine is required. Basically, everything can serve as fuel in a hybrid rocket engine so long as it burns when there is an oxidizer present. As the rocket fuel, as well as the rocket body itself, an acrylic rod of about 1/2 inch in diameter will serve both purposes. The material on the outside of the rod must remain strong enough to act as the housing, since the acrylic will burn internally. Then you would first cut a section of the acrylic rod and drill a core through the center, as long as you don't let the rocket burn for too long. Due to the small size of my drill press and its short downward travel, you need to put shims underneath your acrylic piece to lift it in stages as you drill the core. Once the core is complete, you tap a few threads on one side to make it easier to attach to your oxygen supply. As a result, you then use steel brake lines as the input, so you tap the threads the appropriate size for a brake line fitting. Afterwards, you thread a length of line through the engine and out of the fitting. In the meantime, you might think that this line might catch on fire. Steel is indeed flammable when there is excess oxygen. However, its ignition temperature is so high that it is unlikely that the rocket engine can ignite this material. As opposed to this, a vinyl tube can be used as a sort of hybrid rocket engine if you run oxygen through it. It is, of course, not advised to try this for yourself. To get the oxygen tank a little further back, you will, however, use vinyl tubing to connect to the brake line. This will allow you to run an oxygen supply a little further back and utilize the brake line in the engine. If the brake line extends far enough from the rocket engine, the vinyl tube will be protected from getting burned, so you shouldn't be concerned about the burning happening. But you still want to keep an eye on things. Quite simply, as you probably noticed, this setup is quite simple and indeed you are already ready to try a test burn. You can then use a candle as the ignition source in this case, and as soon as you turn on the oxygen supply, you will see the acrylic catch on fire. Now that's pretty cool, and it works just like a hybrid rocket engine. In reality, an engine devised this way cannot produce much thrust since it lacks a nozzle to direct the flow. A rocket nozzle would also be nice with some bits of graphite and a few of those. This is because due to its ability to withstand higher temperatures greater than most other man-made materials, graphite is an ideal material for rocket nozzles. In this bag of graphite, there was a piece with a hole drilled into it that fits very snugly over your acrylic rod. So this is what you will use to make your nozzle. Now, rocket nozzles are typically made using very complex calculations, particularly the size of the exit hole and the angle at which the cones meet on the outside and the inside. Since you are just demonstrating a rocket here, you are not particularly concerned about extreme efficiency. You can simply create entrances and exits with steep drill bit and the formed nozzle will sit directly over your engine. Additionally, since the rocket is now completely sealed, an alternative method of ignition is needed. Once again, you can turn on the oxygen supply, but this time you insert a wooden skewer capped with an ember into the engine itself. Oxygen creates a flame that ignites the core of the rocket with no trouble at all because of the excess oxygen. You can now see how the engine performs when it's fully throttled. When the flame does not conform to the exit cavity of a nozzle that is not ideally shaped, you will be able to tell that the nozzle is not ideally shaped. By adjusting the oxygen supply valve, you can control the burning intensity very precisely. This is a key characteristic of hybrid rocket engines. Hence, this is one of the best demonstrations of a hybrid rocket engine. It may even be possible to fly the model if the oxygen regulator was streamlined a bit, and the oxygen tank was smaller. As rockets are transparent, the remaining fuel can be seen on them. Now, what does Musk have to say about rockets? Elon Musk believes that building a vehicle that represents the holy grail of space travel is an important goal. Several private companies, including SpaceX, have succeeded in launching humans into space in the past year, but the public perception of billionaires boarding rockets has drawn widespread criticism. Musk began his presentation by explaining the benefits of space transportation, citing its importance in ensuring that the security of life itself, inspiring children about the future, and preventing terrorism. Sometimes he will be rebutted by a question such as, what about all the problems on the planet? Further, he said that he agreed with the sentiment that the vast majority of resources should be devoted to solving problems on Earth. Then he said that more than 99% of our resources should go to solving terrestrial challenges, while maybe 0.5% should go to space. Further, SpaceX has been developing the nearly 400-foot tall Starship rocket, aiming to build a vehicle capable of carrying cargo and groups of people beyond the Earth's atmosphere. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for watching. If you would like to receive updates on Elon Musk and his companies, make sure you click the subscribe and bell button.